Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be talking about the newest record from Courtney Patton called What It's Like to Fly Alone. You know, it's a bit of a shame that I haven't really had a chance to discuss Courtney Patton's solo work as much as I had her material with her husband, Jason Eady, like their last project Something Together. So let's rectify that, shall we? And the first thing to note is that while she's worked in indie country with Jason Eady, her own lane is a little different than his. Less of a straightforward traditionalist in country and more leaning towards Americana or even folk. Now this means she typically brings a little more lived-in detail to her songs. And while the structure of her writing can feel a little more ragged and kind of rough around the edges, it doesn't detract from the mature framing and painfully realistic pictures that she paints. Perhaps not quite as elegant as Lori McKenna, but she'll bring a little bit more of a direct edge in her writing and especially her delivery that McKenna might balk at. And sometimes to get the punch you need, that's exactly what you want. Now on the flip side to all that, for as much as I like her last few records, So This Is Life and Triggering a Flood, her production can feel sometimes a tad inconsistent, not really getting all the way there, which is why some of the critical buzz suggesting this was more of a country affair than outright Americana, that was intriguing to me. Of course, those same critics are also raving this might be one of the best goddamn records of 2018, full of complicated, songwriter-driven stories than more of an overarching narrative, so alright, given that this has flown under the radar of pretty much everybody except the die-hard indie country set, and even then, not all of them, I really wanted to give this a listen. So, what do we get on What It's Like to Fly Alone? Alright, here's the thing. This is one of those projects, like with Wade Bowen's Solid Ground, that I sat on for a little bit. I gave this a lot of listens. Most because while I knew it was great, and I wanted to savor that, it was also a slightly trickier task to evaluate how great it was. Most because it's so damn straightforward in its presentation. Easily Courtney Patton's most country album to date. And like with Jason Eady, the complete lack of frills and pretentiousness makes the conversation about what it's like to fly alone more about the refinement about what we get than extraneous elements that might enhance or detract from the stories that are being told. And what it ultimately means is that they're tough records for me to review at length beyond, you know what, it's consistently great, support independent country, go out, buy this album. So, alright, let's get the easiest stuff out of the way first, the instrumentation and production. I feel kind of bad about calling it easy because I have to give Courtney Patton points for self-producing this project, which you probably couldn't tell if you didn't know from the arrangements and the tone. It's got the assured, understated grace of a professional here. The acoustic guitars are rich and show off some pretty complex picking if you're listening for it. The pedal steel and pianos, they're elegant to provide some great melodic counterbalance. The vocals, they're clear and use multi-tracking with a lot of restraint and really good taste. And that fiddle pickup, my god, the clarity, the texture there is absolutely superb, especially given that Courtney Patton lets the fiddle take a fair few solos across this album, which was definitely appreciated. Now, what's more interesting is that this record doesn't indulge in the vintage indie country cliches. Like Jason Eady, this is a record that is much more reliant on straightforward compositions and clean arrangements than production gimmickry. And while that can definitely work to define the sound of producers like Dave Cobb, I'm also not gonna lie and say that it can't be a little bit played out, especially in certain indie country sets. That said, I'm not without my quibbles in some of the arrangements and production here. I do feel the percussion and bass grooves are a little bit underdeveloped and underserved and could add a little bit more forward momentum overall. And when you are playing to a more traditionalist style of composition, as Patton is here, cuts that are a little less developed lyrically, like Sometimes She Flies, they don't stand out as much, even despite being quite good on their own. That's important to note here. There are no outright dud songs on this record, and even cuts that I'm not as crazy about, like Gold Standard and I've Got One Waiting. In the latter case, despite really liking the energy, the hook can feel a tad clunky lyrically, but they're still really good songs. And the great cuts like the minor key Darkness of Round Mountain or the phenomenal piano touches behind 14 Years and Open Flame, they are easy standouts, mostly as they feel a little bit more developed and take a little bit more chances with their content and presentation. I honestly wish Courtney Patton had done a little more of that. So now, about that content. Well, title of the record is not kidding here. These are a set of stories, some autobiographical, some not, of women that are walking a very lonely road, sometimes created by circumstance, sometimes by bucking against societal constraints and expectations, but nearly always of her own choice and accord, and not always a bad thing for her to do that either. And what I like is that this record is smart and world-weary enough to show the mature consequences that have always lingered behind the choices of their protagonists. She's not about to deny the sins sins that were committed on Devil's Hand, or running away from her family on Round Mountain, and she's fully aware of the consequences that will likely come down upon her, but she's more interested in showing the audience the whole picture and then asking what they think, asking why she might do this. Round Mountain in particular hits really hard in this department. In her religious small town that her protagonist is in, she's expected to be the homemaker and raise the kids without the world of experience that she desperately craves and is probably owed. Even if the consequences for making that choice late are dire, she's going to lose connections with her family. And I really appreciate the nuance behind the women that Courtney Patton writes about. Just as strong-willed as any swaggering outlaw male counterpart, but also willing to ask for help on songs like Shove, or question that lonely path on songs like the title track, where she gets sideswiped by a hawk after a rough night touring on the road and sees an odd moment of cross-species empathy, and I kind of dug that metaphor. And that's before you get the songs where the loneliness really isn't anything she could have controlled. I prefer the more bare-bones acoustic version of Words to My Favorite Memory that she made on Something Together with Jason Eady, but a woman facing down the loss of a partner and that moment linked to a great moment of art in that Merle Haggard song, it fits just as well in context on this project. And that's before you get tracks like the barroom loneliness of Red Bandana Blue Kent song, reminiscing about an old friend who ran a bar who's passed away, or especially the absolutely heartbreaking 14 Years, written about her actual sister who died in a car accident over a decade earlier and what experiences they could have had together. But you know what? She still does have agency. It also leads to one of my favorite cuts here, Open Flame, which might as well play as Me and Mrs. Jones written from the woman's perspective. She knows that she could find something real and powerful in this love for someone who's not her husband, but she took a vow, and she needs to step away before their affection gets any stronger. It's not played for melodrama either, it's just an achingly sad song. Easily one of her best, and it's a real album standout, especially playing against that piano. But as a whole, yeah, damn great record. The sort of unassuming but quietly brilliant project that's gonna get overlooked by a ton of people because it's indie Texas country that almost by design plays as low-key. I wouldn't say it's quite perfect. As much as it's a good cover, I probably would have kept off Gold Standard, mostly as it doesn't really fit in well with the themes of the rest of the album. But Courtney Patton is such a damn good songwriter with such a strength for lived-in detail and mature framing that there's so little for me to criticize. It's just that solid. For me, easy 8 out of 10. But like with Jason Eady, it's the sort of record that can be kinda hard to recommend to fans of more mainstream country. It definitely plays to an older audience who's willing to take in the fine details and restrain slower tempos. But you know what? If you give this one the time, my God, so worth it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Not a tremendous amount to say about this, but, you know, get it. It's really damn good. Link to buys in the description below, and I got the poll up there for those of you guys who have heard it. I'm curious where you fall on it. This record's not getting huge distribution, so yeah, it might be tough to find, but it's still worth it. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, and that schedule's looking pretty big right now, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Want to see a schedule? Link to my Instagram down in the description below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.